Hello, hockey humans of the world. Welcome to Tough Call Podcast Season 5, Episode 13, covering the period from December 19th, 2023 to January 8th, 2024. I know it's usually 1 week at a time, but I'm getting caught up from the Christmas bustle, so little bonus content for you here, an extra week's worth of stuff. I'll be talking about Nick Cousins, boarding in general, Nick Cousins again, and why his hit on Valimaki was not dirty, which it wasn't. And now he's being used as a scapegoat, a patsy, to deflect from an ongoing league-wide problem of boardings and cheap shots that have happened since the beginning of time and continue to happen. We've also got another boarding to that end. Cross-checking will make an appearance, as it always does, and just for fun, we'll throw in a slewfoot by frequent contributor to Tough Call, Radko Gudas, our good buddy here. That and more, you will not want to miss this episode. As always, if you want a more in-depth breakdown of any of the incidents I talk about here, and for even more hits and questionable calls, check out Tough Call on YouTube and subscribe to the Tough Call channel. I just passed 4,000 subscribers just this week, so thanks very much for that. And I'd like to keep it growing, so let's keep that going. Subscribe to Tough Call on YouTube, and while you're here, subscribe to the Heavy Hockey Network so you don't miss any of my future episodes. And you can check out all the other podcasts here, like Oilers Live Podcast, Fantasy Hockey Hacks Podcast. Both those shows are friends of Edmonton Sports Talk, by the way. We've also got the 99 Forever Podcast. We have Paddle Down. There's 97 Octane Hockey here. And, of course, find all of our articles on the website, www.heavyhockey.com. I should say, since I expect this episode will have more viewers than usual, and I've been getting a lot of new followers, I should really explain kind of what Tough Call is. And if you want a more in-depth breakdown or understanding of what I do, go to the Tough Call YouTube channel. There's a video called What is Tough Call? It's 15 minutes long, and it tells you pretty much everything you need to know. But basically, you just have to understand when I give my suspension numbers that I would give, it's not about what I think the actual NHL would do. It's not even about what I think the actual NHL should do under the current format. It's about me creating my own disciplinary system and saying what I would do if I were the head of player safety with my own discipline standard and having already set a discipline precedent. So just keep that in mind when you hear my numbers. But for the most part, I'm just going to break down the incidents and explain to you what I would do about them. That's what Tough Call is all about. A lot of people say that the department needs to be stronger, that they need to be better, but you can't just say that. You have to come up with an idea, and this is my idea for how they can be better and how it would look in real world if we tried to apply it to real world situations. So it's a lot of fun. It creates a lot of discussion, and we learn every day and grow every day. And hopefully we can come to some sort of common ground about how to make sense of the violence in the NHL, which we'll talk about a lot on my final segment. Here's the thing. And with that, let's get into our very first segment, which is the weekly total fines and suspensions, or WTFs. So here's my WTFs. Between the period of December 19th, 2023 and January 8th, 2024, the NHL's Department of Player Safety issued 1 fine and 1 suspension. Over that same time period, Tough Call, using my system, would have issued 4 fines and 4 suspensions. And here's the ones we agree on. First of all, Ryan Hartman got fined $4,427.08 for high sticking. Say the line, Bart. It's the maximum allowable fine for high sticking. I do agree with the rule that if you are caught when someone's mic'd up, they can't use that evidence against you. I do like that rule. It protects the players. It keeps them from having a personality. If this is the price we have to pay, that's fine. I would fine for this high stick anyway. I actually don't have a video of it. Usually I show the video of the clip right now, but I actually don't have a video of it right now. I never posted one. I never got around to it, but I totally agree with this fine. I would have fined him $5,000. What's the difference? Mine's just a round number because I don't have a percentage system like they have, but same thing. I agree with this fine. I like it. I like that they can't use the audio against him, but I feel like it's a situation where they needed to recognize that something went wrong that didn't need to happen. You can't just intentionally get a guy in the face on a face-off. So great fine. I agree with it 100%. The Jason Zucker retaliation, he was given 3 games for boarding, Nick Cousins, he retaliated. Here's a look at the clip. It's just awful. Like, the puck's nowhere around. He deviates from his original path of travel, goes out of his way to make a beeline and take advantage of an opponent who is not expecting to get hit, should not be expecting to get hit. He does it from behind into the boards. This is a terrible, terrible hit, and it definitely needed recognition from the Department of Player Safety. I don't think 3 games is enough. Under my system, this would have been 8 games. 8 games for boarding. Get it out of the game. I don't know why he would have done that. Well, I know why he would have done that, but I don't know why we would allow him to do that, is I guess what I should say. Now, those are the 2 that they gave. I told you they gave 1 fine, 1 suspension. That's it for the whole period, starting with December 19th to January 8th. And a lot of stuff has happened during that time that they missed. So now I'm going to run through the ones that I think they missed. So December 21st, Yakov Trenin. I'm going to just pull the clip up here for a second. Yakov Trenin got a penalty for boarding. They didn't do anything about it. I would have given him 3 games. I thought this was a terrible hit. Here it is right here. Player is clearly facing the boards the whole time. The puck is at his feet and goes to his left. There's no reason right now with the puck right on his left that this player, Trenin, would assume that the Flyers player would turn to his right when the puck is actually at his left right now. There's no reason to expect him to open up as much as he thought he would. He does try and get him from the side, there's no doubt, but his stick is way up in the air, and he goes right through the back and boards him, puts his head right into the dasher. It is completely avoidable. That's the key. It's not like it was unavoidable. It was completely avoidable, and it should have been foreseeable that this would have been a check more from behind than the side. So to me, this is your 3 games, not the Jason Zucker style where it's just an all-out malicious attack. That should be way up there. This one here is your 3 games. It's more than just a regular hockey play gone wrong, more than just a little penalty and that's it. You should address this because that was exceptionally avoidable. Moving on to Shane Gostisbehere. This was hilarious. I don't know if you saw this clip, but he wasn't happy with a penalty he got. So when he went to the box, here's the penalty here, interference right there. It was called for interference, and he didn't like it. So, I mean, he does get in his path and take him down. Does he go down lightly? I don't know. Shane Gostisbehere obviously felt that he did because when he goes to the box, he does the big swan dive. It's funny. Its personality is great, but you can't do that. That's embarrassing. Too many people around the league. So I'd fine him $2,500 for that. It's not a big fine. That's your warning fine. That's unsportsmanlike conduct. You can't do that. You have to set a better example than that. But it was kind of funny. Brandon Tanev, he hit Zach Whitecloud. This is the kind of boardings that I find don't get called, and I can't believe they don't. Look at the distance traveled by Tanev. He's at center ice right now, skates all the way half the rink, and just drives through Whitecloud's back. There's not a thought of trying to angle or slow down in any way, shape, or form. You always talk about if Whitecloud turns or puts himself in a vulnerable position. Whitecloud stops, protects himself, and leans back into contact, and he's still driven face first into the glass. It shouldn't be up to him to protect himself so much as it is for Tanev to wait and see whether he's going to be eligible for a clean body check before he drives him backwards from behind. And this is what I mean. Later on, I'm going to talk about how you're allowed to hit in the numbers. People always say, well, it was in the numbers. That's an obvious penalty. This is couldn't be more in the numbers. Drives him face first into the glass, and it's not even a minor penalty. And it's only not a minor penalty because he didn't get hurt. And you wonder why players like Nick Cousins boarded Eric Branson, or why these things happen. Why Trenin would think it was okay to hit Morgan Frost in the last example. Because this guy, Tanev, skates all the way from center ice, full blast. He does glide at the last second, but it's not to slow down. It's just to adjust to make sure he doesn't miss his opponent. So he makes sure he gets him from behind instead of veering off to the side. That's why he's gliding. Puts his hands on his hips and shoves him into the boards. What could he possibly do there to protect himself other than get his hands up and pray that he gets his hands up in front of his face in time? That shouldn't be what we're expecting a player to do. We should put the onus on the player delivering the check to make sure it's not from behind, not into the boards. So to me, this is 3 games for boarding. Mason McTavish, moving on. Let me load up that clip here. So this is a check on Dylan Larkin. There's a scrum in front of the net. Mason McTavish is coming to join that scrum. And he comes in, stick up, waist height, and there's not a thought of a puck here. This isn't a positional battle. Larkin is already engaged with another person. And he just comes in and drives him in that tender spot just above the pants in the back. And it's intentional and forceful. If you watch his hands go forward, it drives into that sweet spot. Larkin's not happy about it, and I don't blame him. He was already engaged with someone else. He already was in a battle for position with someone else. That's not to say someone else can't come in and knock him off the puck or try and do something hockey-wise to win that battle, but you can't just come in and cross-check a player in the back like that. Not a thought of the puck, not a thought of positional battle, just trying to eliminate an opponent who's in a dangerous spot. You can't have that. And because he targeted specifically a part of the body that's very sensitive and unprotected, that's a fine. That's what pushes that up into more of a we have to stop that from happening now. We got to make sure that players around the league don't have the same idea. And this one, I don't know how this was missed. But to the wire for qualifying for this episode, we had Radko Gudas on Lucas Raymond. This is right at the end of a period. Shoot, I forgot. This is the video where I do the talking. So I just muted it there. We have a shot. We have Raymond, who turns away, isn't even involved in the play. Look at him. He's not looking at Gudas. The period is about to end. He has tried to get in the shooting lane and block the shot, and now he's just peeling away. He's not trying to deliver any type of check. This is not Gudas protecting himself. This is Gudas initiating and attacking an opponent. Raymond's just turning away, not even a thought of body contact, and Gudas just comes up behind him, drives his leg backwards in behind Raymond's, and throws his leg forward and thrusts his upper body backwards and slams him down. There's nothing hockey about this. It's completely avoidable, completely initiated by Gudas, and completely pointless near the end of a period. So to me, this is not just being strong, this is being really stupid and going out of your way to be dirty. That's what it is, going out of your way to be dirty. And that's the kind of stuff, this stuff that has nothing to do with hockey, needs to be punished. Slew footing is always a terrible thing to do. To me, that's 8 games. Not a chance. So with that, that's the ones I think they missed. That's my 4 fines and 4 suspensions. So now we'll move on to our next segment, which is the incident of the week. Okay, this episode's incident of the week is a combination of 2 plays. The Stevens interference on Peyton Krebs and the McMahon boarding major. To me, this signifies either where the league is trying to make up for things or where they possibly should go. We'll take a look at the Stevens interference. To me, this is just a puck battle. 2 players going for the puck. Contact is made and 1 player goes down and 1 doesn't. There's nothing overly aggressive about this play. There's nothing overly malicious. It's not a player driving too much into another player who should be unexpected contact. It's just 2 players racing for a puck, trying to gain position on each other. 1 wins the battle and 1 doesn't. There's nothing egregious here. I was surprised that he got a penalty for this. Now, having said that, maybe this is where the league wants to go now. Any violent contact into the boards, they're going to be a little harsher on because they're under the microscope a little bit. But to me, this is not the kind of stuff you want to get rid of. This is just pure hockey. Good physical hockey, good clean battle. That's the stuff you want to keep. So it's pretty disappointing to me, actually, that this one was called, honestly. As far as the McMahon boarding, though, I know some people are going to say the same thing about that clip. But to me, this is avoidable, it's preventable, and it doesn't have to happen. So you have a player that's going to dump the puck in, and he gets hit. We see this a lot, especially at the red line. then you're going to blame the puck carrier for turning away. Look, they're going to say he turned his back, he shot the puck and then tried to turn his back and avoid contact, and McMahon's just finishing his check. And honestly, when I watched this in real time, I thought it was kind of a normal hockey play. I wasn't disappointed they gave the major, but I thought in real time they would review it and say that it's just a minor or nothing at all. But when I really watched McMahon's feet, that's what did it for me, is he has an opportunity right now to keep going on the same path of travel and go shoulder to shoulder. And instead, watch his right foot flip, and he flips into contact right there. See how he alters his body position to lean unnecessarily into his opponent? This is going to create a situation where contact with the boards is absolutely inevitable. Now it becomes a spot where it's more from the back and directed towards the boards. It completely changes the trajectory of this hit, which is why he does go directly face first towards the boards. If McMahon had just kept his feet going up ice right now, if he keeps turning to his right and guiding himself into the space in front of the player with the puck, there's no issue here. But it's that turn, that sudden turn left into contact and shoving him towards the boards that makes this a major penalty for me. Now, it's not enough that I would suspend, but I'm actually quite glad they upheld the major, because it's not about what the puck carrier does. It's about what the checker could have done better. And in this case, the player delivering the hit, McMahon, could have avoided that contact or lessened the degree of violence of the impact in some way. He had other options, and we have to start asking players to take it. It's the same thing as that Tanev play I showed you, where he followed his defender in from center ice, and all he was thinking about was body, 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 and everything was about body. It wasn't about puck. It wasn't about seeing if the defender was vulnerable or not. It was just kill. That's all it is. And I'm not saying it was malicious or wrong. That's just the way players are taught to think right now. And maybe calls like this will encourage players to think a different way about contact, especially in dangerous positions where a player is known to be vulnerable and in a vulnerable or dangerous distance away from the boards. This was preventable. I liked the major call. I would not suspend or go any further. I think it was a hockey play gone wrong, but gone wrong enough for the major. That's where I think boarding should go. This is a good standard. The Stevens one, like I said, wasn't really happy about it. That was just a 50-50 battle. This was more than a 50-50 battle. This was a player delivering a check on a vulnerable opponent in a way that made it more dangerous than it needed to be. That's my standard. As always, with our incident of the week, I always like to bring up a clean check of the week, because that's what I'm about. I want to show you what kind of hits I want to see. And I know some of you might not agree with this one, but it's the Brendan Smith hit on Connor Bedard. I thought this was a player stepping into a lane. Like, he didn't do anything to push out, target the head, drive up. He didn't do anything like that. He just stepped into a path where Connor Bedard was going to skate right into him, and that's exactly what happened. Bedard just ran into a wall, ran his face off the shoulder pad, and unfortunately it did result in a serious injury, which sometimes happens on clean checks. That's why we can't base our calls on result. We need to base it on what the player did wrong or didn't do wrong. And here, Brendan Smith did nothing wrong. This is good, clean contact that I want to see more of. I obviously don't want to see fractured jaws, but I want to see players stepping into lanes and not using their shoulders, not shrugging them up, not exploding or lunging into contact or reaching out to a player. This is good positional body checking, which is the way it should be done. Another example of that is from the World Juniors. How could I not show this one? McGroarty, boy, this was a fantastic hit. Honorable mention for this week. Look at that. Look at the high impact. You can deliver violent, forceful contact in a safe way. I don't want to get rid of hitting in hockey. I don't want to have a no-hit league. I want to see things like this, but I want to see it done safely. And what he does is the exact opposite of what McMahon. This is a great point, a great example of what I would have expected McMahon to do. Watch McGroarty's feet. Instead of turning in to his opponent, he's turning in right now, but it's only to adjust his angle of approach. But at the moment of contact, he does the opposite. McMahon was turning away from his opponent during approach, and then at moment of contact, turned into his opponent to make it more dangerous. Here, McGroarty is turning towards his opponent to get his angle of approach, but at moment of contact, he flips his feet away. He flips his edges away and turns towards the net, not towards his opponent, so that his opponent now is just skating into him, so he won't go through the head. If McGroarty had kept his trajectory towards the corner, if he keeps his trajectory going towards the corner, he's going to go through that Swedish player's head. There's no way to avoid it, except if you go out of your way to avoid it, which is what I'm trying to ask people to do. So he makes that sudden shift back towards his left at the very moment of impact so that he's not going through the Swedish player. Like I said, the Swedish player is actually going through him. And the violence of the impact is created by the general speed of the game, by the speed of the puck carrier's approach. It's not generated by anything forceful that the hitter does. It's generated by the natural course, the natural speed of the game. That's the type of body contact I want to see. So this was a fantastic hit, and I really want to point that out as an example of, first of all, what McMahon could have done better and what I want to see more of. So you're going to look at some of the things I say, and you're going to say, well, he would suspend everybody, and there wouldn't be anyone left to play hockey, and he wouldn't have any hitting. Players would just stop hitting altogether. Might as well take hitting out of the game altogether. I hear that all the time. I don't want to take hitting out. I want to see awesome hits like this, which would happen under my system more because I'd ask players to be better, be smarter, be safer, be better positionally, and they'll create positional, high velocity impact, just like Smith did, just like McGroarty did, just like many players can do, like that I'll show in my clean checks. I have a YouTube channel, Tough Call, and on that there's a playlist called Clean Checks, and you can watch clean check after clean check after clean check. Don't tell me there's no open ice hitting in hockey anymore, because there is. I have a whole playlist full of them. You just have to we just have to ask players to do it more often, and we'll see more of it. Fantastic stuff. And with that, let's go to my next segment, by request. And this week's by request is the Connor Murphy hit on Nico Hischier. And this is the opposite of everything I just talked about. It's a player who does go out of his way to create dangerous contact, and he does it late. So here's a look at Hischier drops the puck, and then he gets blasted, right? So the puck is already gone. Murphy has not started the hit. It hasn't been initiated till after the puck is gone. And then he pops out and up into this contact to create extra velocity. Now, you're going to say, this is what I want. I want them to squat and get low. Yeah, I want them to squat and get low. And you can do a tiny little outward explosion, like a tiny little bit, just to counter the force of the speed of the player coming at you. But he sure isn't going that fast. Remember how I said the velocity of a hit would be generated by the speed of the puck carrier? But Hischier isn't going fast enough to generate the speed, to generate the velocity required to make a high-octane impact here. So Murphy gets tired of waiting for him to come to him, so he stops up and reaches out and goes toward Hischier, which would be okay probably if he had the puck, but even then it would be questionable to me. But he doesn't even have the puck at this point. The puck is long gone. There's a large gap between the two, and Hischier isn't coming up fast enough to him to get body checked. So Murphy has to step up and initiate contact and then do things to create contact where it doesn't need to be. That's the problem. So that's why I would call this late. People are going to look at the puck and count the seconds. How long after the puck is gone before he gets hit, and that's what they're going to base it on. To me, I base it on the fact that this hit isn't initiated yet, and therefore, once the puck is gone, there's no purpose for this hit whatsoever. So it's already late no matter how long it is after the puck. The fact that Murphy has not done anything to initiate this contact yet is what makes it late. It's initiated after the puck is already gone and after the puck carrier is no longer eligible for any contact whatsoever. Now, having said that, if Hischier was going fast and Murphy just stayed in his path and Hischier skated into him, no problem at all. But that's not what happens. Hischier slows down and Murphy stops up and drives into him, changes trajectory and drives into him. The puck is long gone. There's no reason to lay this body right here. It's a case of a checker going after a player who's not eligible to be checked, more so than it is a player who has just gotten rid of the puck and is carrying on their path of travel. And you just have to make contact, because otherwise you would be in a situation where you're going to let that player go by. This is not that kind of case. This is initiated well after the puck is gone. That choice to lean in and drive up into this hit and create excessive force is the problem to me. Now, it is through the core, right? Like I said, if this was a case where he had the puck, I might consider thinking differently about it, but the puck is nowhere in sight and hasn't been in sight for long enough to still bother to go out of your way to make this check. So that's where I'm at with it. I think this was interference. It was late and it should have been called, and it wasn't. This is the kind of stuff you have to get rid of, not in a sense where you need to suspend or anything, but you just have to change the mindset of the players to why am I throwing this body check and what could I do to make it more safe? There's things he could have done differently here. So with those three examples that I just talked about throughout the episode, I hope you're getting an idea of what I'm talking about. High octane, high velocity body contact is achievable without creating excessive force and excessive danger. With that, we'll move into our next segment, which is kind of just an of note. I just kind of talk about things that are going on around us. And first, I just want to touch on how awesome it is that we can watch women's hockey at any time. The PWHL started on New Year's Day. I watched the first game with most of the members of my family and immediate family and then some surrounding family. It was great. The hockey's good. It's exciting. And the fact that it's so accessible is what's exciting. I was at a hotel recently for one of my daughter's tournaments, and you could just come back to the hotel and pop on the TV, and boom, there's women's hockey. If I want to check the game later, it's on. Some of them are on the Sportsnet app. It's so easily accessible now. People are talking about it. There's a lot of interest around it. I'm very, very excited about this league. I haven't picked a favorite team yet because all the players I'm used to seeing play together internationally are now spread out on different teams. So it's been fun for me to try and watch all the teams, and I'm going to try and pick one and I'm exploring all the players, getting to know them and getting to know how the teams look and operate and what their identities are and that sort of thing. It's just a fantastic, exciting time to be around women's hockey. And, there's been nights already where the NHL's been on and I've chosen PWHL. Can't ask for any more than that, right? To have that option and to be able to take it from time to time. That's the choice I've been made. I found myself making that choice. There's games in the NHL I'm just not that interested in, and I want to see what the PWHL is all about. I hope they keep my interest, and based on the level of play that I've seen so far, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I'm going to talk about the NHL's cross-checking crackdown. In earlier episodes up to now, I've been talking about how at the start of the year it looked like there was going to be a real crackdown on cross-checking. I was very excited about the ones that they were calling. Now it seems it's slipping through the cracks again. I remember saying about episode 4 or whatever that I don't want to get my hopes up because I've gotten my hopes up before. They've done this before with certain things. They said they're going to crack down. You start to see a lot of calls and then nothing. Just goes away. But they maintained this cross-checking apparent crackdown for, a month and a half. That was exciting to me. It really got my hopes up. But lately we're seeing a lot of cross-checks that aren't called. The standard is going back to what it used to be. Then you have the Brendan Dillon cross-check on Kiprusoff. You have that McTavish cross-check on Larkin that I just showed you, where players are getting away with cross-checks that they really shouldn't be getting away with. They're just too blatant and too forceful. Now, I'm not saying that's a fault of the official. I'm really not. They've been asked to call it to a certain standard in the past, and sometimes they call some obvious ones, and sometimes they don't. But for the most part, they were on top of things. I think the problem is with the rule. There's an excessive degree of lenience or variation because it's all based on force. It's not based on location. I could cross-check someone in the head, and if it's not that forceful, if it looks incidental, then it's not going to be called. And to me, the problem is, why is your stick up in two hands anyway? That's not the way to make a proper hockey play. There's not really any situation where that would benefit me. Skating, stick handling, And the only way it benefits me in a positional battle is if I'm going to push out with my stick, which is a cross check by definition. So there's not really many times as a player where I'm thinking, oh, I better put my stick up in two hands right now. That's going to help me. So as soon as I see a player with their stick up in two hands, I would generally be on high alert to watch for that. Whereas in general, they let players get away with one and they'll call the second one, which kind of defeats the purpose. And they'll let a player get away with a push as long as the arms aren't fully extended uh, when when they're delivering the blow, so that it's not excessive force. And that's the problem. Too many times you can get away with things with a very, very light cross check if it's delivered to the right spot. And players know that. They know that. I was listening to an episode of the Jeff Merrick show, and he was talking about a player. I can't remember who it was, and I really wish I could. But his brother was also in the league, and he was telling a story about how when he accidentally cross checked him, he said it was an accident. He didn't mean to do it, but the accident was caused because in his mind it wasn't accidental in that he didn't mean to do it. It was just accidental in that he forgot who it was. So he said, I went to cross check him right in that sweet spot, just above the pants, like you always do, like you're trained to do. And then as soon as I did it, I was like, oh no. And it's supposed to be an amusing story, but really what he's just told us, and what many players have told us, is that you're intentionally targeting spots on the body that you know are going to hurt an opponent. So these soft little cross checks, and I can tell you, I've experienced them. It's not necessarily the one that does it. I used to have welts on the back, my lower back, just from repeated little cross checks. It's kind of like concussions, right? When you think about it, it's not that one big headshot. It's the little repeated blows to the head that are causing some problems. Obviously, the big ones don't help, but the more little ones you sustain, the more easy it is to get injured uh, with in the brain, because your brain is just constantly being repetitively battered. It's the same thing with a cross check. It doesn't look like a penalty, but 5 little cross checks after on the same spot will wear that down and weaken it. And after a while, that'll become the same violence and same degree of danger as a little cross check. So to me, I don't know why we let players go up with their stick in two hands at all. There's no real benefit, like I said, hockey wise. There's no situation where I'm like, yeah, I think I need to have my stick up in two hands. And the consequences have been too catastrophic over the years to allow it to happen. And if we don't allow players to put it waist tight, imagine how few times it would go head height the way it does. You know, when someone says, I meant to cross check him in the shoulder and I got him in the head. Well, what are you cross checking him in the shoulder for anyway? That's not a hockey battle. There's no hockey purpose for that. That's blatantly committing a penalty. So if you get anywhere near the head or neck, it should be a major penalty. And it would be much easier to apply that standard if we weren't worried so much about force and we were more worried about the fact that they're cross-checking at all. So that's the way I would deal with that. I just go harder on people that skate around with their stick up in two hands because they're asking for trouble. So I was optimistic about this crackdown, but I really think it's gone. And especially down the stretch and by the playoffs, I think we're just back. We're back where we were. We're going to see players injured needlessly, and we're going to see lots of people getting cross-checked and having it not called. And it's going to be very frustrating, disappointing. It's already a little bit frustrating because we've seen a couple of superstars go out with it, and it's just so needless and pointless. So that's why I call this cross-checking crackdown, because there's been a breakdown, a crackdown in their attempt to get rid of cross-checking. There's just not enough of a commitment to do it. It will never go away. We'll never stop seeing these problems unless they commit to it 100%. They were only calling things that just to appease people, and now they're just going back. Now that no one's talking about cross-checking anymore, it's just going back to the way it was. And it's the same thing with the boardings. You can see that Stevens interference, a couple of the little boardings they've called that they wouldn't normally call. They're just doing that because boarding is under a microscope right now. And they're just trying to appease people for a couple of weeks until they stop talking about it. And then it will go back to the way it was. And that's what's going to get me into my topic of here's the thing. And here's the thing, and I've titled this segment, Here's the Thing, Nick Cousins Isn't a Rat. Because as we know, Kevin Bieksa called Nick Cousins out, called him a rat, called him dirty, and said basically applauded the way Zucker dealt with it, and more players need to deal with that way. He talked about the boarding on Edmondson and how Edmondson attacked him, and he praised that too. But Nick Cousins is not a rat. I mean, here's the thing. The Stevens interference I talked about, it all comes down to what we want to do with the Cousins boarding on Goodbranson. That's what people think, that hit was so evil, but it wasn't. It was a standard issue play. Now, I want people to know, having said that I would have given that a 3-game suspension. I felt that boarding was not just a hockey play gone wrong that could be dealt with by a penalty. I think the suspension needed to happen. So I want to say that right off the gate. But what I'm saying is my standard is higher than the NHL's in general. I would have only given that a 3-game suspension. And that's what people want the current NHL to give it. But the current NHL can't do that based on their standards, because it wasn't a hit that was overly excessive compared to things we see. It wasn't even the worst boarding that one weekend, let alone the worst boarding that we have to nail this player to the wall, throw the book at him, and then call him a rat and single him out. We can't do that and hope that appeases the problem. That's picking a scapegoat, because other players have made that hit. The hit by Pasternak the next week, to me, on Lindgren, was exponentially worse than the Cousins boarding, and people were defending that. To me, that was a way worse a hit. Goodbranson and Cousins were both just trying to find the space. Goodbranson won the battle, and Cousins ended up hitting him poorly because he wasn't anticipating losing the battle. He was overcommitted, and that's what caused the dangerous contact. So I'm not saying he shouldn't be punished, but I'm saying he shouldn't be punished more than anyone else, because that kind of play happens all the time, and nobody cares. That's the problem. Nobody cared until Goodbranson beat up Cousins. That's when people had no choice but to take notice. So that was the best thing that ever happened, because at least it got people talking about it the way I've been talking about it for years. And now people are saying, well, here's an example, right? I'm going to read some notes. So it's finally a hot topic in mainstream media because on the Hockey Night in Canada panel, Ron McLean started describing the segment of that weekend where that boarding happened. He called it an outbreak of violence, right? It's not an outbreak of violence. There's been this kind of violence for literally years. It's not an outbreak of violence. It's a culmination of a lifetime of violence that finally players are snapping. I don't really know why this one pushed Goodbranson over the edge more than others, because it really wasn't that bad compared to some of the other hits you take. But it only takes one. And I'm glad in a way that he did it, because it got people talking. Calling it an outbreak suggests there hasn't been a lot of violence leading up to that, which is what the NHL prides itself on. Like I said, that boarding wasn't even the worst one that weekend. And also, Goodbranson attacking Cousins wasn't even the first time a player attacked anyone this year. We had Zach McEwen go ballistic on Matthew Tkachuk. Right? He grabbed Matthew Tkachuk and started pummeling him. Nobody was talking about that. Nobody was really supporting McEwen in that way, right? But I don't know what the deal is. We just kind of swept that under the rug for some reason. That game itself had a third period penalty list that was longer than my grocery list, right? That was a violent game. So I guess maybe it was just something that didn't stand out amidst all that violence. But there you go. There's not an outbreak of violence. That's how much violence there is at the game. Not that long ago, we had a period that was insane amounts of penalty minutes, and we're having boarding after boarding after boarding, which I'm going to show you here. I have a whole YouTube channel of receipts, like showing all the boardings that I'm going to run down here. They're all videos on my YouTube channel. You can watch the hits. You can compare them to the Nick Cousins hit, and you tell me what the difference is, because I don't see it. Boarding is not a new problem. That's what they have to get into their heads. It's not a phenomenon involving from players suddenly turning their backs like people tried to turn it into. It's not about that. It's a mask. That is a mask for the real problem of the NHL not wanting to call penalties, because they're so afraid players will stop hitting altogether. That's what it is. Every time The NHL makes a decision. It's based on the fact that the importance is on emphasizing the physicality of the North American game of hockey, especially in the NHL. When George Peros was hired as the NHL's head of player safety, he, in an interview, said his mandate was to keep physicality in hockey. That's the mandate of the department that's supposed to keep players safe, is actually to maintain the physicality in hockey, not to change the way players think about it, not to make the game safer in any way, to make sure physicality stays. That is their number one purpose, according to the head of the department that's in charge of disciplining this kind of stuff. So who do you think they're going to side with in general, right? Basically, they just want to blame the victim as much as possible so that they don't have to deal with it. And if they can get away with blaming the victim, then they can encourage players to continue to do it. And then eventually they want to throw the hammer at one person just to say they're doing something. That's not the way this should work. So for me, between November 7th and 16th, I'd have suspended between November 7th and December 16th. I would have suspended 13 different players for boarding and fined one more. 4 of those were in one weekend, right? So others, there was a couple that were even in the same game. I think there was 2 instances where there was 2 boardings in the same game, and I would have suspended them. I'm going to run through them here. You can look them up, make a note of them, look them up on my YouTube channel. Remember how you felt about them at the time. Ross Colton boarding on Luke Hughes back on November 7th. It was called a 2-minute minor, which I can get behind. I can get behind that being a minor penalty, but I would have followed it up with 2 games because I think it was avoidable enough that he should have done better. 2 games, right? Under my system, that's a pretty lenient suspension. The NHL should have fined or given a game probably. From that same game, Miles Wood boarded Jonas Siegenthaler. There was no penalty at all. None, not even a call. I'd have given him a major penalty and 3 games, right? And that's no call on the ice. And it was a major penalty in my eyes. To me, what's the difference between what Miles Wood did and what Cousins does? There's not much of a difference at all. The only difference is in the result, but the habit is the same. The approach to hitting is the same. And that's what I'm talking about. If Siegenthaler had been seriously injured, we'd be talking about Miles Wood and we'd be throwing the book at him. But we're looking at the wrong thing. We're looking at the end result. We're not looking at the type of hit it was. November 11th, I would have fined Dylan Holloway for boarding Brian Dumoulin. It wasn't much, but it was exceptionally avoidable to the point where I can't ignore it, right? It was called a penalty, right? They got it in the game. But to me, it's just a little bit too beyond. I would have fined it. So think about how things would have looked if there'd have been a suspension on November 7th, if there'd have been 2 from the same game, then a fine 4 days later, and then the next day, Duhaime boarding on Harley on November 12th. It was called a 5-minute major on the ice, but the Department of Player Safety did nothing about it. I'd have given him 2 games, major penalty, 2 games, right? Imagine if that had happened. So now we would have had 4 suspensions and a fine within a 5-day window. People would have been talking about boarding then, right? Then the Brendan Smith boarding on Nemesnikov on November 14th, which was just 2 days later. It was again called a 2-minute minor. So it's not like the officials aren't calling it, right? They're getting most of these. But I'd have given them a major penalty and 3 games. November 18th, Jacob Trouba just nailed Tyler Toffoli from behind into the boards. And there was no call at all. I'd have given him a major penalty and suspended him for 4 games, right? If you want to talk about someone being a problem, Jacob Trouba is a problem that should be addressed in some way. He's not a horrible problem, but he's the kind of player you would want to monitor and look at. If you want Nick Cousins to be a rat and kicked out of the league and have the snot beat out of him, Jacob Trouba is the kind of guy that, he could change the way. I'm not saying he deserves injury, and I'm not saying he's a bad person, but if I was the Department of Player Safety, I would want to tweak what he does a little bit to make it less dangerous. November 29th, Will Colley, 4 games I would have given him for boarding Shane Gostisbehere. He got a 2-minute minor, so again, it was addressed by the officials, but I would have given him 4 games. And then the weekend of November 30th, okay? So November 29th already happened. There would have been a suspension. November 30th, Giovanni Smith, I would have given him 4 games for boarding Brad Marchand. It was a 2-minute minor. November 30th, in the same game, I would have given Charlie McAvoy 3 games for boarding Ryan Carpenter. He got a 2-minute minor. Also on November 30th, I would have given Garnet Hathaway 4 games for boarding Luke Hughes. I would have given him 5 in a game. And I know that's the one that people don't agree with, that the linesman made an erroneous call, and, it was just a hockey play hit. But I look at it differently. I'm not going to get into why I look at it differently right now. I'm just going to go through this as what the game might look like. Then on December 4th, Joel Farabee, I would have given him 3 games for boarding Chris Letang. December 9th, I would have given Eric Robinson 3 games for boarding on Justin Barron. December 10th, Nick Cousins, I would have given him 3 games for boarding Goodbranson. There you go, right? Happy? And on the 16th, like I said, that Pasternak hit was even worse. I would have given him 5 games for charging on Ryan Lindgren. So could you imagine on December 10th that Nick Cousins hit on Eric Goodbranson, and Goodbranson loses his mind and makes everyone start talking about this? Imagine how it would look if by that weekend there would have been like 11 suspensions and a fine for boarding up to that point. Right? That's what there should have been. It's not like boarding was just happening that weekend and all of a sudden, whoa, there's an influx of boarding. Think of all the boardings I just mentioned. These aren't even the ones that were just minor penalties that I wouldn't give a penalty to, or ones that weren't called at all. These are just ones that were notable enough for me to talk about on a disciplinary scale. Imagine all the minor boardings that happened in that span. But that was between November 7th and December 9th when the Nick Cousins boarding on Eric Goodbranson actually happened. Imagine how many boardings, like think about that. And then we're talking about it that weekend, like when that happened, they're like, whoa, how does this happen? And why is there all of a sudden a rash of boardings? And what's going on with the increase in violence? No, this is just 1 month. Imagine the month before that. Imagine last season. Nothing has changed. The players aren't doing anything differently because they've never been told to do anything differently. So you can't just all of a sudden come down on the first person that the one player gets upset enough to beat up. And then you go, you know what? I agree with them. We should get upset about that. You should have been upset long before that hit ever happened, right? So that's the way my system would work. Punish the little ones enough that the big ones don't happen, and then you have a right to go after the big ones. Now, having said that, like I said, the Nick Cousins one, to me, wasn't that big. It wasn't that much different than anything else. So to bring us to where something I talked about before, for instance, the Brandon Tanev boarding on White Cloud that wasn't called, and you may not agree that it should be called. I'm not saying that. Like, it's fine. If you look at that and say, you know what, that should be a legal hit, it shouldn't be, whatever. It doesn't matter what you think. To me, the problem is that people always talk about, well, it was in the numbers. So on that same Hockey Night in Canada segment, Kelly Rudy said, well, you have to call it. You can't hit anyone in the numbers. That's just a rule. Everyone knows that. And people always say, first thing you're taught is to never hit someone in the numbers, right? So you don't turn your back. That's not true. There are legal checks to the numbers all the time. Case in point, Brendan Tanev, just from earlier this episode. You can hit a player in the numbers. It happens all the time, and we try and blame the player for turning their back to draw a call. But whenever the player being hit does protect himself, that's the problem, right? So White Cloud protected himself, so he wasn't injured, so there's no problem with the hit. But if he had stumbled or gone into the boards head first, all of a sudden we'd be saying Tanev needs to hold up. But we didn't say that when it didn't do anything because White Cloud was able to protect himself. The point is he shouldn't have had to protect himself from that hit because it was from behind into the numbers from a great distance at high velocity with a high amount of force. So, yeah, the onus is on him to protect himself, to save himself from being injured. But that shouldn't negate the fact that a player hit him from behind, and yet it does. So that's why I think people get mad at players for not protecting themselves, because they say if he protected himself, it wouldn't have been a penalty. But that's the problem. It should still be a penalty, even if the player protects himself, because the hitter still did something wrong. See what I'm getting at? The blame game. We can't just pick and choose based on injury. We need to say whether or not we want hits to the numbers. We always say that hits to the numbers aren't acceptable. You can't hit a player in the numbers. And then we allow hits to the numbers time and time and time and time again. So do we want hits to the numbers or not? If hits to the numbers are legal, then whether a player protects himself or not and hits himself in the head, you shouldn't call it. But then people are upset that boardings happen, and that's why they happen, because we let them happen until someone gets hurt, and then we're upset about it. Which one do we want? To me, I'd want to call all the hits to the numbers to simplify it for the player delivering the check, so that it doesn't really matter if that player protects himself or not, because the hit shouldn't happen the way it does, with the velocity it does, with the force it does, at the location it does, time and time and time again, to put them in a position to be injured to begin with. So it's just a never-ending circle of blame. And we're not addressing the root problem of hits from behind, right? I mean, I have 2 more boardings after this from this episode. They weren't even included in that list. There were 2 more boarding suspensions I would have given just this episode after that happened. So I don't think anything's going to change. You just may see a rash of calls for 2 weeks, and then it will go away once people stop talking about boardings. But boardings are here to stay until we do something about it, until we finally put our foot down and say you can't hit someone in the numbers. And as far as Kevin Bieksa calling Nick Cousins a rat, like, when you think about it, I thought it was hilarious that he said, someone on his team needs to talk to him and say, you're not helping the team. You're making us look bad. You're going to draw unnecessary attention to us. Play the game the right way. But he's not even the rattiest player. Forget a rat around the league. He's not even the rattiest player on the Florida Panthers, right? Nick Cousins is at least minimum 3rd rattiest player on the Panthers. If you want to who's going to talk to him? Matthew Tkachuk? Is he going to give him a lesson on how to not be a rat? Sam Bennett? And yet these guys, the rattiest players in the league, were being praised as the exact type of player you want in the playoffs. Think about that, because that's what playoffs is. It's ratty, it's dirty, it's ugly, it's dangerous, and it's illegal. And these guys play illegal hockey the best. So everyone wants to have them on their team. Matthew Tkachuk is heralded as the MVP, one of the greatest playoff performers of all time, off 1 playoff season. And all of a sudden, Nick Cousins is a rat on that team? Make it make sense to me, right? If you're not even the rattiest player on your own team, how can you be the one that players want to throw the book at, and that people around the league, reputable sports media, want to see as the scapegoat for the overall problem that was happening long before he ever did anything this year, right? So let's deal with the right problem the right way, instead of unfairly singling somebody out for it. That's the thing. Nick Cousins is not a rat.